I cannot answer for what in the end the position was, because the way we are present in the United Nations is, as such, it's only the member states that are present in the United Nations. The European Union as such is present, but the position it will convey will always be decided by the 27 ministers of foreign affairs. So there is no EU that exists independently from the member states or this European Parliament. The positions that the President of the Commission or the Minister for European Affairs, Kaja Kallas, or Mr. Costa, the President of our European Council, will convey, will always be based on a decision on a discussion that has taken place among the 27 member states. So they individually cannot say, oh, the EU is going to vote that way or that way. They have to ask the 27 ministers. And they have to find a majority. And for foreign policy, they have to find unanimity. And if they don't have unanimity, they have to abstain, and they cannot really vote in favor of a particular file. And this is a difficulty. In the Parliament here, we think that in foreign policy, like the other files, it should be a majority vote. It should not be unanimity, because unanimity means that if one or two member states of the European Union do not agree with the general trend, the EU can only abstain and cannot go along with any positions in the United Nations or in any other fora, which is a bit annoying, because if one or two member states are saying, I disagree, it does not mean that 25 others would welcome the decision. But the EU as such can only go for it if they have the go-ahead of all the 27 member states. So on foreign affairs, we are still very much dependent on the decisions of the different countries. So I can explain this is the reasoning behind. And of course, the reasoning behind in the 27 member states and why we did not arrive to unanimity, I think it depends on the decisions that have been taken by the different 27 member states. They have a different relations to history or memory that it can be at different stages across the 27 member states. And they have also sometimes a particular history or relations also vis-a-vis the slave trade that happened, that was totally undue and those past centuries. I have to say on the Parliament side, first of all, we would prefer having votes at majority, because it would be fairer. At least the EU would be able to position more often. And second, we have regular positioning on the importance to recognize the importance of history in the way EU is conducting our relations on foreign affairs. It's very regularly present in our resolutions. And third, we have here next to the European Parliament, I don't know if you saw the park that we have next door, and there's a little park.
Yes, Cynthia and Annie's were there.
That were from the council.
Yes.
There is there a building that is called the House of European History.
Yeah.
That reflects on the history that we live together as European continent. And I have to say, I can only invite you if you have time, Rosa. At the moment, there is a temporary exhibition on neo-colonialism and colonialism and the importance it had on history, and how basically we should reflect on that in our history. So the Parliament decided to have this exhibition in place at the moment to have this reflection on how this still impacts the way we devise policies currently.
And thank you so much for the clarity, because when it was reported, it was like the EU abstained, but now you made it clear that since there couldn't be an agreement by all the 27 member states, they had to abstain.
Which does not mean that there were more elements in the position that was defended by the delegation. A lot of elements were there and justified. So that's the reason we encourage, if you have a doubt or you think it sounds bizarre or the EU abstains, I want to know why, please contact our press officers in the delegations here, because you will always get a fuller story, and at least you can decide for your side how you report it. But at least you understand the reasoning behind procedurally, but also the context of the elements that are put in place. I think it's important, and we can always complete with what is happening in the Parliament.
On the UN, I would just add very briefly that the Parliament is very engaged also within the UN system, and we regularly have parliamentary committees members, vice presidents visiting the UN, whether it's in Geneva for human rights. We had actually the UN High Representative for Human Rights in our Foreign Affairs Committee last week. He's a regular visitor. Also the other UN agencies, and then in New York as well. For example, every March, I think, there is the Commission on the Status of Women, and we usually have our Gender Equality Committee there. For the high-level political forum on sustainable development in a few weeks, there will be a parliamentary delegation there as well, and we often have presence in the form of committees or president during the UN high-level week as well. And one thing is the UN adopted this Pact for the Future in the last 2 years, and part of that, and it's something that the Secretary General Guterres has also been pushing, is enhancing and boosting the parliamentary dimension within the UN system. So for that reason, the Parliament actually now also has colleagues working in the delegation in New York to the United Nations. And I would just say that to answer also your question, what we can share with you afterwards, a couple of weeks ago, Parliament adopted its annual position ahead of the new General Assembly from September, and I can send you the resolution, and there's everything in there on UN reform, permanent seats, and so on. So that could be interesting.
All right, that would be nice.
In the screen. The questions can sometimes differ, but the idea is to see where the population lies in terms of interest and what topics they would want the EU to discuss, what are the priorities. We complement here the work of the Commission, because also the Commission is organizing also their own surveys on sometimes very specific items, being the image towards enlargement of the European Union, what is the necessity to support democracy, what should we do more to support our companies. So I think it can be sometimes very targeted, and sometimes it's more general. In the Parliament here, the survey that is twice a year is a bit of more general nature. It's more about the feeling, how people feel in their life, what is the sentiment towards the European Union, what are the priorities that need to be worked on. I think it's interesting for many actors. It's interesting for the politicians, of course, for the political groups, to know where basically the priorities are among the populations, how they differ according to countries, but also sometimes socio-demographic groups, because the younger generation might not always align with the older generations on some issues. And to us, it's also interesting for communicators, because it shows also the efforts we need to communicate on what is done on those specific items where there is an interest, on what the EU is doing, in general the EU is doing in those areas, because sometimes people might ask more to be done in, for example, protection of, I don't know, the rule of law in our member states, but maybe it's also because we did not communicate enough about the whole scheme that is in place and what they can do. So it allows also to adapt, I would say, our communication and reinforce the communication in the member states where we feel there is a need. So it's of course multiple users, and I think media use it a lot, or content creators using a lot also, to have figures on data, on trends they might feel themselves when they talk to citizens or they get interviews. And I think it sometimes objectifies or give a kind of trend or figure they can refer to. If you see the way it was reported this morning was very different according to the angle the media wanted to push, but some wanted to show attention. Some people are more pessimistic towards the situation in the world, so the EU should be attentive, because we have 58% of the people that think that it's not going better in our world in general. Others will look at what is going well and say basically 90% of Europeans wants to work more united and have more resources. So I think it will just complete stories that anyway journalists would have written, or they can also explain better what is being, I would say, what is happening across the continent, and also have more understanding also of the differences, because sometimes media are located in one member state, but they don't have an understanding that what they are experiencing in one member state might very much differ in a country that is nearer to the Ukrainian border, or that is further away from the war, but nearer to the Middle East conflict, where the trends will be different.